Okay. So with that in mind, today is all about dynamic lighting and cannabis production, and we're going to get into some actual case studies and numbers and data and talk about what the effects are. And to do that, we've invited Abhay Thosar, who's the Chief Horticulture Specialist at Sollum Technologies. Abhay, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, not as you, my friend, because you're in Spain and I'm jealous of you. So,
It's about light, man. The sun, the light, the right kind of light makes
yeah.
humans happy and plants happy too. You know what that's all about. So I have to say I'm in a
Yep,
good mood. I've got my team around me and I've got the beautiful southern Spanish sunshine as well.
absolutely, absolutely. No, thanks. But by the way, I'm in Toronto right now, and it is really nice and sunny too. So, yeah,
Oh, good.
so yep,
Summer,
cannot complain. Yeah.
this is June, it's my birthday month, so everything sort of
Oh,
gets
awesome.
better summertime. So I'm excited about it. Well, how about Abe, you just tell us first, like, who are you and what's a bit of your background so the audience can know what experience and knowledge you have?
Absolutely. So I think you already mentioned what I do at Solum. So I would start that I'm a plant physiologist to begin with, and I had been a grower for almost 12 years in commercial greenhouses, growing a lot of different crops. Of course, not cannabis, because at that time, based on my age, it was not legalized, so I couldn't grow cannabis in the greenhouse, but a lot of different crops. I have been a commercial grower in the commercial greenhouse, and then for the last 12, almost 13 years now, I have been working with a lot of different LED lighting companies to say that. And I'm really proud now that I'm working with Solum, because Solum is the pioneer in dynamic LED lighting, like with the 4 channel or 6, 7 channel fixtures, which now I see a lot of posts on LinkedIn, a lot of other companies that I have worked in the past. Now they're catching up after 10 years, like they're thinking, oh, we should have done this earlier. So whatever, but I'm good to be on the Solum side, to be on the forefront and doing all this research with the dynamic lighting. And that's something that I would like to share today, that how it works in cannabis.
Yeah, I think it's so cool that you have this experience from the commercial growing background. We've talked about this before. And then now you're working on this research and applications of the research aspect of it with Sollum, a lighting company. So yeah, let's get into it. We're going to have a presentation from Abe. As I said, I might jump in with some questions and then we'll have an open discussion about this. So yeah, you can share your screen whenever you're ready, Abe.
Awesome. I'll do that right now. And let me know if you can see my screen well.
Yeah, I see it. Well,
Already. So let's jump into it without any further delay. So today we are going to talk, as Henry mentioned, that this is all about cannabis quality as well as the production and how dynamic lighting impacts it. So having said that, what we are going to cover today would be, of course, we know a lot of the cannabis growers are still using HPS in their current facilities, whether it is a grow room or a greenhouse. And that's why we'll touch a little bit, not a whole lot, because a lot of growers already know about it, that they need to switch to LEDs, but I would still touch a little bit on the retrofit from HPS to LEDs. And then, of course, what we are here for, we'll dive into the real world applications. What's going on? Like, does it really work, or it's just like BS? Yeah, I know. And I'm allowed to say that on the webinar. So. And then we'll also talk about, so this is where the essentials of growing cannabis with dynamic lighting. So being a plant physiologist, that's another thing that I like to discuss with my growers and my audience is don't just focus on light only, because yes, light is the driving force, but along with that, you need to make sure that you have 8 or 9 other parameters or growing factors that you need to dial in order to make sure that you're getting the best results or the best plant responses. And then lastly, we'll also talk about some of the dynamic LEDs, unique capabilities. What that means is how the different wavelengths impact on the growth and plant response in cannabis. All right. So having said that, we'll jump right into the retrofit from HPS to LEDs. So how does it work? Like from the grower standpoint, there are 2 scenarios. The first scenario is either they can do a wattage match. What that means is they can replace their existing 1,000 watt high pressure sodium with 1,000 watt dynamic LEDs. So that's an easy swap. They can just remove those, switch it with a dynamic LED. You're good to go. Now, when you do that, what happens? Now, if you look at our, and most of the growers, they do follow a lot of other static LED companies, and no different than that with the dynamic. Also, you have a PPF number, you know, compared to how many PPF you would get from 1,000 watt. So based on that, typically you find that when you compare it with 1,000 watt high pressure sodium, there is an increase in the PPFD at the plant level, anywhere from 25 to 40%. So what that means is the growers, when they make a switch with just matching the wattage, you are going to get a higher PPFD. So, and we already know that there's a lot of research that has been done that with increase in the total
And
moles per
and
day or
Abhay,
PPFD. Yep.
sorry, can you
Yeah,
explain? Can
go ahead.
you explain PPFD a little bit, just the basics, just in case some of our audience isn't as familiar with it?
Yep. So in the in the layman terms, or from in the grower language, I would say that's the number of micromoles that you would measure at the plant canopy or at the head of the crop, if that makes sense. And sorry, you're muted.
All right, how much of them are getting down to the plant, the leaves itself?
Yeah, so that depends on the lighting layout. So because you can have a PPFD, which is the photosynthetic photon emitted from the fixture, but what you get at the plants is, as you can see in my background, yeah, those fixtures are hanging at the trusses. But then what you get at the canopy level, that's where you need to go through a lighting layout.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So no worries. So that's one of the scenarios where you do the wattage match. The other scenario is where the growers would say, hey, you know what, I'm comfortable growing with 1,000 micromoles or 1,200 micromoles that I'm getting from my HPS. I would like to maintain the same ppfd or micromoles. I keep interchanging those two words, ppfd and micromoles. It's the same, basically. So they can do that by replacing the 1,000 watt HPS with approximately around 700 to 800 watt dynamic LED fixture. And what that does is they can save energy. So instead of spending 1,000 watt or 1,040 is actually what you have a HPS, and then you have the losses on top of that. So it's almost 1,100 watts. So compared to 1,100 watts of HPS, you are now spending only anywhere between 700 to 800 watts of energy. So that's a direct energy savings of 25% that they can gain. And on top of that, because the fixture is focusing more on the spectrum for the plant growth and photosynthetic activity, you are still seeing the improvement in the yield. So it's a double whammy in a good way. So you're still saving the energy and still getting a better production and quality. Uh, Third important thing that the growers ask is, okay, when I make this change or switch from HPS to LEDs, I need to change my whole infrastructure, my HVACD, and there's a lot of hassle that's going to happen. In fact, it's not. And that's based on my experience that I have worked even in my past jobs. We have done a lot of different retrofits, and there's a minimal changes that you can do to your infrastructure. And there are really some easy solutions. And I don't want to get into that right now because we have a different topic today. But definitely our audience can reach out to me if they have any questions regarding that as well. Now, the most important thing, ROI. Because when you make that switch, how fast can I get my money back? And that's always a question by the growers. Absolutely. For cannabis, where we know that you can have a better A grade buds and you get paid really high value for those A grade buds, with the switch to the dynamic LED lighting, you can definitely push those percentage of A grade buds in your canopy, whether it is one room or 10 rooms or a greenhouse. And based on that, what we have seen, again, through all these other applications that I've done in the past, it is less than a year. In some cases, it is even in 6 months, you get an ROI. Like if you just switch one room, you're able to see that you're getting the return within 6 months. You can take that money and you can retrofit your second room. Why? You can keep going in stages. So anyway, That's way more than I thought on retrofit from HPS to LEDs. But
Let me,
Henry, we talked in the past, and sometimes I get passionate and then I just keep talking. So you
yeah,
need to
it's
stop me
okay.
if you think I'm going overboard.
It's all good. I think it's a good moment to actually ask people, especially if they're growers on the line here on the Zoom, what light fixture are you currently using, right? Are you using a fixed spectrum LED, dynamic, HPS? We're going to ask you later on what crops you grow, but this is obviously relevant based on what you have. And we're seeing a mix here based on the responses coming in. I'll end the poll in just a moment. So fill in your last responses on the poll here. Okay. So we see mostly fixed spectrum LEDs, some on dynamic and some on no supplemental here today on this webinar. So it gives us some idea, but the over 50% are fixed spectrum LED.
Yep.
Let's continue with the presentation. Thanks, Abhay.
Yeah. No wonder. And I'm not surprised with that because, to be
Yeah,
honest, as I
so do I.
said, like 10, 12 years back, we didn't like Sollum was the first one to actually start, dynamic LED spectrum, and people did not believe in it. To be honest, like I was on the other side too. And I'm not blaming the growers because until now they were, and that's why I'm like, okay, 50% are using the fixed spectrum LEDs. That's fine. At least they're using the LEDs. Now is the time to switch
Right.
to dynamic LEDs and take it even a notch higher. So how can we do that? That's our real world application. So I'm going to share some of the data from Cheers Cannabis is one of our customers in Canada. I'm based in Canada. The company is also based in Canada. It's a proudly North American company. And Cheers Cannabis also is in Canada. So what they did was, it was again, as I was explaining, it was a retrofit. They removed their existing HPS. They outfitted with the Sollum LED, dynamic LEDs. And these pictures that you're seeing here on the slide, they are from their existing facility that we have taken those pictures from. So it is a closed room. And what we did was, as I was explaining to you earlier, when you do that switch, you are able to get a higher ppfd or micromoles at the canopy level. And because of that, as you can see, they were able to get an increase in production of up to 40%. And the reason I say up to 40%, it's more cultivar dependent because there are a lot of different cultivars and different cultivars will respond differently. And based on that, and this is exactly where it gets really interesting for the dynamic LED lighting, because now you can adjust the spectrum based on the requirement of each cultivar rather than having a one fixed broad spectrum through in the whole room. And you have like 15 different cultivars, and yeah, the only thing that you could do is probably dim them. In most of the cases you cannot even do that either.
And this I want to dive into a little bit more because I have firsthand experience visiting Cheers Cannabis and understanding the value proposition that you just described here of having that individualized control. So it was really fun. I got to go out to Cheers Cannabis in Canada and see their facility, and I sort of get closer, and you could smell the cannabis in the air. And there's this warehouse, right? A little bit of the set. You go in, they're the nicest people, and they showed me their rooms, and they're using the Sollum dynamic LEDs to create recipes, right? It's how they describe it, right? These recipes, obviously a plant recipe can involve climate, but lighting is a major part of that, include your fertilizer, et cetera. And I asked them, I said, why is this important to you? And they said, because it's a really competitive industry now, right? There's a lot of competition. And so what's going to
Right.
differentiate your product on the shelf, and how do you stay ahead? Right? Because consumer preferences, they have so many choices, so many dispensaries, so many options now. And so how are you going to differentiate? How can you sell it? How can you add flavor? How can you increase the cannabinoids? How can you increase the look of it in some ways for them, the smell of it, all these things that make the product more exciting. And so they were really passionate and just genuinely had such a great testimonial to say about Sollum to me in person, about that control that it gave them to basically, you know, cook, to create their
Yeah.
strains in that across the rooms. And they're continually innovating and creating new ones because the same lights that they bought, they can continue to adjust that. So I thought that was a really, really exciting, for me, a visit that I got to have to see the tech in action.
No, you're absolutely spot on, Henry. And because that's exactly what's happening now, because we know how the cannabis market started, how it, peaked up, and now we are seeing that there is more. It's not just about production, it's not about how many grams can I get per square foot or square meter. It's more on, yeah, what's the improvement in the quality? As you rightly said, I'm looking at the terpenes, the THC, the cannabinoid, a lot of that. And that's where is the bag appeal for the product, to retain the customers. All of these are really, really important. And that's something, to your point, it's more like as a chef, like it's not like a grower, but now they have these tools whereby they can grow, for each cultivar, they can have a really, very strict lighting strategy, but also environmental strategies along with that. So, and it is really good to do that because it is a high value product. When you're getting something for $1,000 a pound or $1,500 a pound, you know what? As a consumer, I would expect that these are, some of the standards that I want to have in my product. So,
Yeah, it's like wine, right?
yep, exactly. So, but the good thing is now with the dynamic LEDs, we are able to offer that to the customers, and they can have almost like a designer product, if I can use that term, you know, for
Yeah, totally.
each of them. So whatever Cheers is doing, it's different from what the second slide that you see here is green tone. They are
Let me
different.
just say one more thing about Cheers before we get into the next case study, because if anybody wants to like see their facility in action, they were really cool. They opened it up for me, and you can find it on Agritecture's YouTube channel. We do a couple different videos where we talk about how the lights work, also the software behind it that they use to create the recipes and the consultations with Sollum, as well as the lighting itself. And you can see me go through the actual rooms from all the way from the young plants all the way to harvest period. So you could check that out on my Instagram, the Agritech, or on the Agritecture YouTube. And we did that in collaboration with Sollum. So let's move on to the next case study here.
Perfect. Yeah. So the next one is, and I picked this on purpose. It's a green tone. That's the name of the facility, and it's a greenhouse facility. So I wanted to give two different scenarios. One is in a grow room, no sunlight or no natural light at all, and the other one is in the greenhouse. And it's a lot of the times people ask me, "Yeah, I'm in the greenhouse. Do I still need the dynamic LED lighting?" I'm like, well, let's see if you definitely need it or not. And that's the reason I have this business case or an example to share with our audience today. And I see that you have another poll coming up.
Yeah, I'm running it sort of
Yeah,
dynamically
yeah,
during during this. Okay, so Greentone, they increased their production by 25%. And
correct.
I think Cheers got a little bit more, but that Cheers is fully indoors and this is greenhouse, right? So that's a bit of the
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well. What are
yeah.
some of the differences in that, like for cannabis particularly? What are some of the differences you might see in those applications? I'd love to learn a bit more about that, Abhay.
Absolutely, and that's where I wanted to share some of these results, and you really have a good eye for that. You rightly spotted. Oh, it was 40% and now 25%. Why is that? And I'll definitely get back to you because when you are in a grow room, you have a lot more control
Yeah,
on not
exactly.
just the lighting, but a lot of different
A lot of
parameters in the
factors.
grow room, right? So you can really control it rather than managing it. So this is the two terms that I use. That when you are in the greenhouse you're actually just managing all the different parameters. You don't have a control because you're still at the mercy of Mother Nature, right? When you're in a grow room, you can actually control all the parameters. So that's the big difference between the two. But regardless, and then also there are other differences in your working capital, whether it is a grow room compared to a greenhouse. But we don't want to get into that on this webinar. Maybe we can plan another one specifically for that. But yeah, they were still able to see the increase in the THC percentage to 10% from their existing levels that they had, which was really good. And that's one of the important objectives that they had in order to improve their product quality, but also important to retain their customers and also increase their customer base. And then most important for them was also 1 week faster harvest time. Now you can see like if you are having 6 or 7 cycles in a year, and if I have 1 week faster time, guess what? I can put in one extra flowering cycle. That's huge. That's huge. Because if you have one extra flowering cycle, that's where you do the math. And I know there are a lot of people on this call, they can do the math themselves, how much they produce. If they can get one extra cycle, it's definitely going to pay for the lights. I can assure you that for sure.
Yeah,
So,
it's all that infrastructure, right? So if you can
yep,
speed up production, your real estate, all that infrastructure, the lights, the greenhouse, the facility, you're making more out of it, as just like the yield as well. And that THC increase, as I understand it, speaking to some cannabis growers, that's really again about creating a premium product or controlling it or customizing it.
yep,
This is a bit of a random question, but I've been actually speaking to a couple of cannabis users, and there's also a trend to like not just increase the THC, but also control it, right? Like reduce it or create
yep,
like a wine or something, create the right balance of flavor in THC because THC has gone up so much and not everybody wants to get completely out of their mind, right? They want to have an experience that's maybe different or maybe they use the product more frequently. So,
yep.
is reducing the THC or let's say dialing it in.
Yeah, and so that's where we get into the world of craft cannabis, where you're really, working on the different, properties of the cannabis. So in order to do that, as you rightly said, yeah, light is one of the factors that really pushes, or tries to push the crop to get a much better photosynthetic activity, the plant biology. But along with that, being a plant physiologist, I like to focus on a lot of other different parameters that need to be in fine tune. And I like
Mm.
to give an example of, a synchronization in a band. Like you might have a band of 100-piece band, but if they are not playing in synchronization, it doesn't sound good to you. You know what I mean? That's exactly the same thing here. If you just have the light and you'd say, I change the light and then it doesn't grow well, my friend, you haven't adjusted, 8 other parameters in order to complement that light. So temperature is very important because it influences the growth and development of the root, shoot, leaves, flowers. We know that, right? It is really important to dial that in. So I have given here the range that you need to be able to go from 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason I'm giving this range is depending on the different growth stages, we will, and also the cultivars, how they're responding, we should be able to dial down the temperatures or even dial it higher as per the requirement of the crop. Along with temperature, it's important to have the humidity. The higher humidity, we have reduced evapotranspiration, and there's a slow dry down of the media. If there is a lot more humidity in the room, you might have the susceptibility to fungal pathogens as well. And again, I don't want to go deeper into this because a lot of the growers, they already know it, but I still wanted to touch some of these points.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to describe that, this is a piece of the puzzle, right? Like,
Exactly.
you've got the lights, you've got the climate, you've got the temperature, et cetera, and they have to work together. And I like the analogy of a band working together here. Um,
Yeah. So just if we keep chugging along, it's VPD. Well, we know if you have a temperature, humidity, you need to be in the sweet spot for the VPD by adjusting the temperature, humidity, and also important is the airflow. So if we go to the next slide, we look at the airflow, which is really important in cannabis, especially, you want to maintain that humidity in order to have a much better transpiration happening at the leaf surface. So CO2, that's another important component because we all have learned in high school, like a H2O plus CO2 in presence of light, it gives us, all these sugars plus energy. Like that's the basic equation. So if you don't have enough of the CO2 in your room or in the greenhouse, well, guess what? You're not going to have the optimized photosynthetic activity for the crop. And along with that, it's important to adjust your fertilizer because if you're going to push the crop, it's again, the second analogy that I would give is like driving a Formula One car, right? So if you're driving it, now you're driving it at a really high speed, you want to make sure that your RPMs are correct, all the different, meters that you have in that you want to make sure that everything is firing up really well. Otherwise, if something misfires, you're not going to get a good response while you're racing. So same thing here, this is one of the other factors. Like if you dial everything well, but if you're not focusing on fertilizer, guess what? The plant is saying, well, you're not feeding me enough that I can deliver. So So those are
Abhay,
the, yeah,
just on that, like, I remember when I visited the Sollum HQ and I got to see your team, and it's just like a diverse team of people developing the technology, and there's a huge customer service team.
yeah,
And a lot of what you're describing is about how the lights have to work with these other fundamental aspects to, again, keep the car or the band running in harmony. Um, can you share a little bit of like about maybe even some examples of that experience? Because I imagine some growers are like they've always done it a certain way. Are there compromises that need to be made, or is it more the solemn lights are so adaptable that you just sort of hear from them about what they want and then you apply it? Or do you sometimes have to tell them, hey, use nutrients in a different way to make the lights work better? Do you see my question is like,
yeah,
is there a
yeah.
give and take between these factors, or is it that the dynamic lights adjust to what they are doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the dynamic lights, they do help, I would say, the growers, but at the same time, the way our customer service team or customer success team works at Solum is more where we offer our learnings. So we have learned a lot of things over these 10 years, how the plants respond, and that's something that we share openly with the growers. So that's number one. Number two is we also offer what's important is the post-sales support. So it's not just, okay, here are the lights, go figure out these are dynamic lights. You can play with the light intensity as well as the spectrum, go figure it out. No, no, it doesn't work that way at Solum at all. That's exactly where we do the hand holding for the grower. We share our experiences. We even train them at their facilities and ensure that the growers understand what are the other parameters that need to be done. So we would look at their current infrastructure facility. We would give our recommendation. Okay, if you need to adjust your airflow or your fertilizer or your humidity, we will give them our recommendation and work with them to find the best possible solution for their facility. So it's more of a customization rather than just giving them uh, like a research paper. Take this and go figure
Sure.
it. You know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that back and forth must be, really a lot of value that the customers get. But I'm like, have you ever told someone, like a customer, you have to do your fertilizer differently to maximize the lights? Do you see what that question is? I just don't know if
Yeah.
that's how it works.
Yeah.
Or
And again, I've said this in my past webinar. The proof is in the pudding.
yeah,
So that's exactly what happens. We do share our recommendation and we get a pushback. I was a grower, so I can speak for myself. Hey, I have grown enough crops and you don't need to tell me how to grow it. You know,
yeah,
well, that's a grower confidence. I'm not saying that it's something bad, but at the same time, it's more that the growers understand it too. The growers would be like, okay, you know what? I will try it in, on one bench and I'll see what difference it makes. As soon as they see how the plants are responding with the change to the fertilizer or to the temperature or to the strategy, they adapt it. Like growers are really smart people. They will see it. But the thing is, show me. Like that's something that we have in horticulture is I can do all these slides, but if I show them on one bench, boom, it right away, they take it and they apply it right away. So
yeah, that's the way to do it. I mean, it's natural that there's skepticism about new technologies or new expenditures, right? So that's why I wanted to unpack a little bit about what that relationship looks like with the customer success team, as these lights play a much bigger role across all kinds of controlled environment agriculture. So
yep.
before I want you to continue in a minute, but I see, John, you raised your hand. We weren't really going to have people speak, but I sent you a chat if you want to confirm with me that you do want to speak on the webinar, or you can just ask me the question. And anybody's welcome to ask questions using the question feature or our chat as we continue here. We've got Abhay here and myself. We can answer questions about CEA, about cannabis, about technology. So let us know. I see more people raising their hands. So if you raise your hands, it means we're going to let you talk, which you don't usually do, but I'm happy to take a bit of an adventure if we want to do that. But I just sent you a chat as well. So let's give it a try. John, let's see. John, are you there? I'm asking you to unmute. I would prefer you use this chat function, colleagues, but it's up to you. So John, if you unmute, you can speak. Otherwise, we're going to continue and you can use the chat. Okay, let's keep going up. Hey.
I think he's there.
Oh, he's there. Yeah, there we go. John? Oh,
Oh, he's muted again. So, well, I'll continue, and if you see the question in the chat, then you can ask me that question, Henry, if that works.
Sure. Yeah, I'll wait for it. You can continue.
Sure. So I just wanted to touch real quick on why dynamic LEDs, because yeah, we have seen, as you probably saw in the poll, more than 50% are using broad spectrum LEDs, for cannabis, and those are the fixed spectrum. Of course, the technology was not commercially viable. Now it is. And what can you expect when you use a dynamic spectrum? So of course, I'm not going to share some of the recipes from the customers because we have an NDA and I cannot share that for sure. But I'm just going to share in general the physiological aspects and how the plant can respond. So in mother plants, what you could see is a better lateral bud formation. So that's something really important because you need to have more lateral buds in order to get more cuttings per plant or per mother plant, right? So if you have those, which we can really push with the dynamic lighting, and then use a far red, because in certain cultivars, you really want the cuttings to stretch. Otherwise, it's difficult for you to A, take the cuttings, and B, when you dip it in the rooting hormone and place it in your plug, you want it to be of a certain size. And that's why if you have like a far red, it can help you stretch it even just in 1 to 2 days application time, and you're ready to go. In the vegetative phase, you can use a higher blue percentage in the beginning of the lighting cycle to stimulate the stomates. And this is a really classic physiological function of blue light and stomates, and how that also impacts the uptake of the nutrients. And when I say nutrients, it is more on the fertilizer side, and how it also impacts the photosynthetic activity too. Reducing the transition time to flowering, and energy and labor savings. Now, when I say the energy savings, the way it can translate, if you're looking at some of the classic broad spectrum fixtures, you're looking at anywhere between 2.6 to 2.8 micromoles per watt efficacy. But if you're going towards a higher, and you could go in the vegetative phase, you can go to a higher red percentage. And what that means is now you can improve the efficacy by 30 to 40% at 3.2 or 3.3 micromoles per watt, and it's not going to negatively impact the crop. The good thing, you can have a same fixture going from propagation to veg to initial flowering to mid flowering to end of flowering. You don't need to have separate fixtures for mother stock, separate fixtures for veg, separate for early flowering. No. And that's the beauty of dynamic LED lighting, where you can really use one fixture and dial in the ratios of red, blue, green, and far red as per the requirement and the stage of the crop.
I mean, that's another really fantastic value proposition, right? Because if you're making a change in your facility or you've got just all kinds of different technologies or different lights, it's like you said, the static lights, you buy them. And I think I was talking about to your team in person, right? The plants have to adapt to the light, essentially. Whatever the light is, the plants
Right.
have to adapt. But with dynamic lights by Sollum, the lights adapt to the plants and every other condition.
Yep.
So, you've got multiple stages of production. You're going to be buying these different lights. You think that's the best. The market changes, the consumer interests change, or maybe you just want to grow something a little bit differently and you're stuck. But you're saying that every single part of my room for every stage of production, I can have the same fixture and I can have the control dynamically to change what I want to do to adapt to that recipe. I mean, that's just a very clear value proposition.
Yeah. Yeah, and that and I know I'm repeating it again and again, but it is more, it's a commercially viable fixture, and I see a lot of other companies who were, selling or who are still selling fixed spectrum LEDs. They are now started to, following Solum and trying to advertise and do the marketing that, hey, the dynamic spectrum really works. I'm like, really? Yeah, Solum already
Yeah.
figured it out 10 years back. Anyway, so if we go into the flowering phase, we can look at how we can initiate more flower primordia, with the ratio of high red, mid blue, and low green percentages, and that is in the initial flowering stage. But then we also know there is a phenomena called photo bleaching that could happen in on the buds. Once you have the buds developed, and if you have a higher red percentages, you see that you get a really white bud, or the tips get really white, and it's called photo bleaching. So with the same fixture, and this is again the beauty, like you have a flowering room, you can start with even say 80% of red. When you have the flower buds develop, you can switch to 50% red. You know what? So now you don't get uh, the photo bleaching. Guess what? A lot of people think, oh, but when I change all the spectrums, I'm losing my ppfd or micromole. So if I start with 1200, I'm going to drop to 600 if I do. No, those are false stories. That's not real. And that's why we want people to reach out to us, and we can show them that you don't lose the ppfd when you do that, when you do change, from the spectrum. And there's a way method to do that. But like, just as there's some as a negative campaign, a lot of people say, you'll lose the ppfd when you start playing with the spectrum. But that's not true. And I can say that right in front of the audience on this webinar.
Hmm.
Okay, so not taking too much time, you can adjust the spectrum to improve the quality of buds. Well, we talked about it, because now we are talking about craft cannabis, where you want to have really niche product in the market, or tailored product to a certain THC, to a certain terpenes, to certain cannabinoids, and you can definitely achieve that. Also, the use of far red. We saw that at the end of the day, for better flower set and uniformity as per the cultivar. Not necessarily it is for all the cultivars, but depending on the cultivar, you can do that. Okay.
Let's just do a little poll here. I want to actually know what our attendees are growing here. So we've got some options between, I sort of put leafy greens, herbs, and microgreens together. We've got some cannabis growers as well, which we want, and other, could be lots of things. We had some people that weren't even using CEA, so it's nice to see a variety here. And appreciate all you joining. So some answers are coming in. We're about 50% the way. Let's see if we can get more participants in this poll. I want to hear what you're growing. I mean, I think it's so interesting that you can just stimulate different activities in the plan. I think for me, I work a lot more in I don't work in cannabis so much, right? Agritecture. Like I've been able to visit some facilities, but we don't consult on it so much. We consult mostly on fruits and vegetables and horticulture. So for me to see the value of the product in cannabis that can justify these technological shifts is really interesting. Because I think in CEA for horticulture, sometimes it's a little bit harder to justify some of these high-tech solutions if the margins are small. But in cannabis, if you really hit it, you can get a bigger margin. I mean, obviously, it depends on how saturated the market is with product, because production has gone up. But that's what I always find interesting about the cannabis industry, where 45% of our attendees are growing those crops, which is fantastic relative to others, is that, that product, like similar in precision agriculture, right? When we look at IoT and sensors for the farms, we worked on hop production, but a lot of the technology we were pulling from was in vineyards because of the value of that product. That's where the
Right.
technology had been deployed sort of first. And I
Yep.
also, just another layer to this, I think it's always so interesting to know just how much innovation separate from academia has come from the cannabis sector because of that value, right? Behind the scenes, they've been innovating and developing their own solutions and having to do this. And it's really exciting now through legalization and various other aspects that, this is mainstreaming a bit more, and we can have cross-pollination in those sectors. But it's a valuable product, so you can really do a lot more with it. And the dynamic lights can make a big, big difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All
Okay.
right.
So there we
So
go. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So we did talk about, the retrofit. We talked about some of the real world cases, application in the grow
Mhm.
room, in the greenhouse. We talked about what are the other factors that you need to dial in order to get the synchronization of the band, so to speak. And then we also saw how the different wavelengths can impact the different growth stages. One of the important things, a very important actually piece of the puzzle, why to go with the Sollum Technologies, is Sun as a service.
Mm.
That's something that a lot of people don't really understand. They're like, that's another software, like, I've seen many of them. Yeah, sure, you can say that until you don't understand how it works, or what what is the flexibility that it is offering to you. And what it does is that you can have unlimited multi-zone, and I'll explain that in the next slide, how best you can use it. This 100% programmable light recipes. So you can have the recipes, you can set them. Now in cannabis, the thing is you would have a multi-state operators, right? So you would have a company, whatever XYZ Cannabis, and they would have operations in different states. Say, for example, in the United States, they would have grow rooms in different states. If as a head grower or director for cultivation, if I was that, I want to have that, okay, I need to have the same light recipe that is being pushed to all these locations without me going over there. Can I do that in the real world with the fixed spectrum LED? Probably not. But with the Sun As, I can have that recipe built into the software. And when, say, for example, I'm in New York and I have a grower in Florida, I can log into their computer and I can push the same recipe for those plants in Florida for those specific cultivars. I know as a director for cultivation that I am having that control over, all these different facilities sitting in one place, but also making sure that they're getting exactly what they should be getting. So these are the kind of, flexibilities that you can get with this and as a service.
Yeah, it's very important for scalability, right? You can imagine you have a facility, you figured out your IP, you figure out your way to grow, and now you have
Yep.
to expand, but obviously you can't clone your head grower and all the ways you've learned that, but you can digitize that knowledge connected to Sun as a service. Now, it's the lighting only, right? Like it's not other parts of the cultivation, but the lighting recipe itself can scale across your operations, which obviously is a critical factor.
Yes. So it is lighting only with Sun As, but the
Yeah.
good thing about it is you can really integrate it with your existing climate computer. So if you
Okay.
are using whatever, whether it is a Priva, a Hugendon, an Argus, a Wadsworth, you name it. Like we have worked with a lot of different climate computer systems, and you can easily integrate it across with your existing climate system. So what
Nice.
that gives you is not just the light, to your point, absolutely, light is the driving factor, but now you also have the control on your other factors and you can dial those into, okay?
Nice.
So just real quick, I wanted to show how can you do that. So imagine this is a grow room, right? The green dots that you see are when you move the plants from veg phase to flowering phase. Okay, so they are all coming in from the veg phase, and what we do is we try to maintain the same lighting strategy that we had in the veg phase in order to avoid them from any of the shock that they might get by a sudden change of light intensity or the light spectrum. So we keep the same. Say, for example, now in the same room, as you can see, the blue, yellow, red, and purple dots, those are the different zones that I can literally, by
Hmm.
clicking, yeah, with the click of the mouse, I can select this whole zone on my Sun as a Service platform, and I can assign this as I can say it is a cultivar A. The yellow is cultivar B, the red is cultivar C, the purple is cultivar D. I can easily do that without doing any rewiring or regrouping of the fixtures at all. What I can do is, after that, I can assign a specific light strategy, which is the spectrum, along with the intensity, along with if I want to have a sunrise, sunset, or if I want to cap it. If I see that, okay, say for example, cultivar A, which is blue, is really susceptible to photo bleaching if I go above 1200 microns. Guess what? I'm going to pick this cultivar A on SunAs in the software, and I'm going to make sure that the light intensity doesn't go above 1200 microns.
What about
Whereas
the other factors, Abhay, like in a grow room or in a greenhouse? What about light spilling onto other parts? How do you account for that? Or I assume I know the light would change also some of the climatic conditions. How do you think about that at Sollum to customize that so that the growers are able to have these different recipes in a same space?
right, so that's a really good question. So if you the trick to that is you try to put like the growers are, as I said, they're smart people. They know which cultivars can go along well together. So even though there are slight differences in managing the light spectrum and light intensity for the cultivars, the other factors would pretty much be the same, which I can maintain for the same room, and I can still get the best output from those cultivars. So then we would work with the growers and we could group those cultivars together in the room, and that's how you can still manage the room in a better way. Now, in order to avoid the light spillage, well, one of the things is, yeah, if you're in a big room and you're over, over the benches, the way to do it is how you're, hanging the lights to make sure that you get the minimum. I cannot say that there would be a zero. No, there will
Right.
still be, yeah, there is still
Oh,
always.
yeah, but that's the choice, right? I mean, obviously, if you can create a dedicated room, that's always going to have
Exactly.
the most optimal conditions. But sometimes you don't
Yeah.
have that opportunity, that space, or that opportunity to expand that real estate or to invest in another facility. But you can still do this. So you can even do trials, right? And you can try.
Well, and one other thing from the physiology standpoint, I can definitely say that if you're targeting, say, 1200 to 1500 micromoles, and on the edge, if you see that, oh, I'm getting 10 to 20 micromoles of this particular spectrum, guess what? 20 micromoles compared to 1200 micromoles of your principal spectrum, that's a very small percentage.
Yeah,
And and again, yeah, as a physiologist, I should say, oh yeah, that still really matters. Absolutely. I can, but as a grower and as a practical grower, I would say,
yeah.
you know what? That really doesn't matter a whole lot. If I'm getting 20 micromoles from this second lamp, this is sitting right beside this lamp. So but anyway, so this is the flexibility that you can get through Sun as a service, which is huge for cannabis growers because there are hundreds of different cultivars that the growers grow in one particular facility, not in one room, but in one particular facility. So the other thing that, and I think you already touched about this, is more than lights that Sollum offers, a complete solution with our customer success team, our agronomist team. We work very closely with the growers and more so post sales, not just pre-sales, not just giving them the BS, as people would call it, you can show me the slides. No, it is more giving them the proof of the pudding in their own kitchen with their own ingredients. So we work very closely with the growers, we train them, we make sure that they succeed using our lights. So along with that, I think we are getting close to my presentation. So yeah, it's just I wanted to show that we partner with a lot of different companies in our industry, and it's more important that it's not just partnering, but we also work together. How we can leverage each other's technologies, and more so in the benefit for the growers. Okay,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Abhay, for that
pretty much
presentation. Really
it.
appreciate it. And there's your contact information. So you're lucky you can directly reach out to Abhay, who's an expert at both commercial production and research. So we're really grateful for that presentation. I'm always impressed by the number of partners. Another anecdote, I'm a judge for the Homegrown Innovation Challenge. And while I travel through Canada, seeing how they're growing berries year round, I heard a number of times and was able to see in person the Sollum Technologies dynamic lights in action, because for these researchers who are testing how to grow berries year round, they needed really those kinds of lights. There was
Yep.
one project that was combining agrivoltaics. And so you've got, sunlight that's changing. And so a dynamic light was required for that. So we got to see those there. So it's really exciting just how globally your team is expanding and working on both academic side. You're doing research, you're doing commercial applications. And maybe I'll just share a couple of things and then we can see if there's some questions. We got some questions coming in. So let's get that in a moment. But first, I wanted to share that you're going to be at Green Tech coming up next week, right? So this is the horticulture fair. So we'll be able to
Yeah,
see.
so our team will be walking the show. We don't have a booth over there, but
Nice.
our team will be walking the show. So we'll have our sales team as well as our CEO, Louis, he will be there. So yeah, feel free to reach out to them.
Well, if you ever need a place to park, come to Hall 1, booth 466 in the Agritecture area. Sollum is always welcome there, and anyone as well. But that's going to be an event coming up soon. And then Cultivate is coming up as well in the US market. So these are great opportunities to meet Sollum in person and to see them. If I could share my screen for one moment, Abhay, as well, please.
Absolutely, yeah, go ahead.
And then bring in your questions. We're going to get into those just right now in a moment. But I wanted to share. Let me see. 1 second. So I wanted to just share a little bit about our census because we are working with Sollum again this year. So with Meister Media and CE Ag World, their event, we work on a global census to bring in data. And this year, I wanted to bring it up in this webinar because Sollum is our silver sponsor again, and they're supporting us really in getting this census out there. So what is a census? We are basically inviting all kinds of growers, and this year, researchers, even field growers, greenhouse growers, consultants, to share insights about their take on the economics of CEA and the applications of AI to CEA. So it's a global census that we've just opened up in thanks to Sollum, and really want to invite cannabis growers because this year we're opening it up to cannabis growers as well. So you're welcome to join. It takes 10 minutes. And thanks to the sponsor from Sollum, there's a $1,000 prize, which will go towards a trip to CE Ag World, an event that's happening in November in the US. So you can get your whole trip basically paid for to that event. And it's basically a lottery for that. And there's a lot of other prizes, including every user, every participant in the census gets 1 year free access to Agritecture's farm planning software. You can estimate the CapEx, OpEx, yield, labor, water, energy of any greenhouse or vertical farm on Earth online. So there you go. Check out the census. You can just search CA Census 2025. My colleague will drop the link here in the chat as well again. And there we go. So let's get into some questions here as we wrap up today. Always a great presentation from you, Abhay. Thank you for that. So anonymous attendee asked for the control grams per square foot. They're getting really deep right here, right away. Abhay, what was the control? I guess the previous grams per square foot before the increase in yield from Sollum fixtures. And I don't know which case study, so you can, I guess, pick one. They didn't say which case study.
Well, I could pick one, but at the same time, I'm under the obligation to not share the real numbers,
Sure.
because as per the person who asked this question also knows that if I ask that person to share a real number publicly, they probably wouldn't share it either.
Sure.
And that's why we talk in terms of percentages of improvement in the production, in terms of percentage as well as the quality. Because under my obligation, I'm not allowed to share the actual numbers. So sorry about that.
Yeah, that shows their actual combined IP and like what they're doing there. So there's that. We do the census because it allows people to share some data anonymously, and we can analyze that data and we can share some benchmarks for the industry overall across certain factors. Like historically, we had the most number of vertical farms share what their water and energy use was to dismay some of the myths out there. But certainly there's certain settings that make sense for that and others that are not. Let's see if they have any other questions.
And it also depends a lot on, what cultivar you're growing, what are your lighting conditions, So
Sure.
for me to say, yeah, it might be for cultivar A, the result that we got, but you could say that, that's nothing, or, oh, that's way too much.
Right.
It can go either ways, so it's not really like it has to be a really specific question. If it has a specific cultivar, what growing condition, okay, then it starts making sense that we can start comparing some values.
Sure. And look, Abhay shared his contact information. Sollum is a great team. You can reach out to them to talk about your production facility, whether it's greenhouse or indoor, and any of the crops that you are growing. Maybe you're a researcher, maybe you're a cannabis grower, like many of you on here, or otherwise. You can talk to Sollum, learn about their solutions, learn about what could work for you. So thank you so much, Abhay, and thank you to all of you for joining this Agritecture webinar with Sollum Technologies, all about dynamic lighting reaching new highs for cannabis production. Thanks, Abhay, and see you around.
Thank you.